Okay, guys, well, we might get started. Thank you, everybody. I'm sure there'll be a few more dialing in as we go along. So my name's Jodie Redcliffe. For those of you whom I don't know, I'm the CEO of Nuffield Australia and the interim CEO of Nuffield International. So welcome. This is our second webinar in our series that we're entitling 2020, the Year of Living Vicariously, or in an ode to one of Nuffield International's core values, lifelong learning in the time of lockdown, which is quite difficult to say fast. I have been practicing. So I will just move my slide along. I hope you're not all zoomed out. We have been all, I think, attending quite a few webinars, and we're probably feeling like we're drowning under a mountain of paperwork and we are attached to our keyboards. But nevertheless, I really appreciate you dialing in tonight or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. So I can see some people have been typing in the chat there. So please tell me where you're coming from and what year of your scholarship you're in, if you are indeed a Nuffield Scholar. That would be interesting to know. And do a little practice with the chat feature. You are all on mute, which means you can't speak. Tiago from Brazil, I know that's difficult for you. And you also aren't able to use your video. So this is the webinar format, so you can only see the host and the panelist rather than everybody like in a meeting format. There is a chat function, which you've seen. There's also the Q&A function. So please, any questions you have as we go along, either for myself, but certainly for Arianna, our guest this evening, today, please type them in the Q&A section and we will try to get to them either through the presentation or certainly afterwards. Arianna is able to stay online for another little while, so we will do our best to get through the questions. So I can see we have online people from all over the place. Brazil, USA, hi Kenny, Frank from the Netherlands, Hetty from Germany, Ranga from Zimbabwe. So we've certainly got a really diverse mix of scholars this evening or today, so thank you very much. We do have some people having some technical issues. Alan's just typed from Australia that she's having trouble joining, and so is Paula. So maybe Nicola, you might be able to resend the email to the 2020 scholars from Australia, and that might be a way that we can solve their problems for them. I'll just type that to Nicola, who is on the line. Ah, thanks, Nicola. Perfect. So there is just a little bit more housekeeping, and that is that there will be a post-webinar survey. So you'll get an email after the webinar, which will have a link to a SurveyMonkey survey, which is just 5 or 6 questions. So if you've got time, please fill in that survey. It does help us to do the best that we can in providing content that's of use certainly to our current scholars, but also to our alumni. We are open to any and all suggestions. So look out for that email with the survey link in your inbox. As well as that, we will also send you the link to the recording of this webinar. It will be going on the Nuffield Australia YouTube channel. So afterwards you will be able to watch it in its entirety, or indeed pass that on to other scholars that aren't able to attend or who've come in a bit late because of technical issues. And I hope that's not our tech issues, but I suspect it probably is. So very sorry to the Australians. We did actually have a Zoom meeting scheduled for this evening, which would have had a different link. So that would be why we're having trouble with some of the Aussies getting on. Now, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for this evening. So we're going to open our Nuffield box of tricks here and put in a few more learnings and tools from our guest speaker, Arianna Giuliodori. So Arianna is one part of a very huge network that we have with Nuffield International. So that network obviously is of use to the current scholars that are travelling or going to be travelling and researching their topics. But indeed, it's a useful network for the entire alumni. So we're very pleased that Arianna was able to join us this evening. Arianna is Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization, and she's had that position since December 2017. Prior to that, Arianna received her communications degree and then her master's in economics and rural development from Siena University in Italy. Farming and agriculture has always been a part of her working life, and she spent 10 years with the Italian farmers organisation Coldiretti. I've been practicing pronouncing that. I think I did okay. First, she was with Coldiretti in Rome and then with Brussels. So she acted as economic officer, Secretary General of Young Farmers, the head of the President's Technical Secretariat, and finally Senior Policy Advisor at the European Representation. After that, Arianna spent 4 years in Paris with an American multinational research and consulting firm, and she was able to receive her master's, her MBA at the Sorbonne in Paris. So that's given her a strong business-orientated approach, which she brings to her current role with the WFO, where she brings a strong governance mindset, which is very important, and also a wide set of international partnerships, of which Nuffield International is now one. So I think you'll agree that this is a fantastic way for us as Nuffield Scholars to make sure that we have a voice and a fundamental role in the challenges that we'll be facing now and in the future. So I'd like to hand over to Arianna. Before I do though, I'd like to remember my current favourite quote, which is, "To be interesting, you must be interested." So as you sit back and relax and listen to Arianna, I hope that you are interested in what she has to say to us this evening, and we'll try and sort out our technical issues, and please use that Q&A function to be typing questions as we go. So I will turn on Arianna's video and unmute her, and then she can be sharing her slides. Welcome, Arianna.
Hello, Jodie. Good, very early morning to those who are in Brazil. Good morning to the others, and good evening to you. Thank you very much for your introduction and for this opportunity. And I will share my screen, so please tell me if there are any technical issues or if you can see my slides. And so should work now, yeah. And please, if anybody would like to raise questions while I'm still talking, please feel free to do it. I'm just asking Jodie's help here because I cannot see now the question and answers tag. So maybe you can just jump in and interrupt me if there are any questions. So again, that's a huge opportunity to spend some time together, and I hope you're gonna enjoy it, and feel free to raise any kind of questions. I am going to introduce to you the World Farmers Organization and spending some time with you sharing what we are doing, what is our role on the international scene, and for sure we cannot avoid to talk about the outbreak of COVID-19 and the impact of the international activities. And I would like to open two special focuses, one on climate change and one for sure on youth empowerment within the World Farmers Organizations. And then I would say last but not least, questions and answers, because I think that it's really in our mutual exchange that we can grow and we can learn more together. Let me start with presenting to you, to those of you who don't know WFO, who we are. So first and foremost, we are a farmers organization. 9 years ago, the farmers decided they wanted to have their own voice in the international arena, and they created an organization. So it is made by the farmers and for the farmers, with the precise aim of bringing their voice on the scene and bringing their voice in the international processes that are affecting agriculture beyond the national policies or the regional dimension. So what we do is to bring the farmers' voice on the global scene. And actually what we do is advocating for their interests and needs, ensuring that governments and international organizations are taking into account the farmers' expectations. Here you can find a few examples of the very many processes that we are following, including, for sure, the Agenda 2030 for the Sustainable Development, but also the climate negotiations, the WTO Public Forum, so the World Trade Organization initiative, and so on and so forth. I'm not going into details in order to save enough time for the questions and the debate. So, as I said, farmers' organizations created by the farmers with a clear global footprint. We are organized in 6 different constituencies, 1 per each region. So North America, Latin America and Caribbean, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. And the little flag that you can see on the screen shows where our headquarters are. And it's important to mention that we are based in Rome because that was a deliberate choice of the founders, members of WFO. They wanted to be very close to the UN so-called Rome-based agencies, so FAO, IFAD, and World Food Programme. And as you probably know, Rome is the UN food and agricultural pole, and it's very important that the farmers can bring their voice. Today, we have more than 70 members coming from more than 50 countries across the globe. And our members are national farmers organizations. I could notice, for instance, in the chat box that one of our members from Zimbabwe, CFU, is represented today among the participants in this webinar, and I'm glad to see them, our friends. So, as I mentioned, this organization was created by the farmers to represent their interests. And what is the interest, the main interest of the farmers? For sure, is to ensure that sustainable agriculture in its 3 dimensions can be lively and can deploy its potential in ensuring food security across the globe. When I say sustainability under its 3 dimensions, I clearly refer to the environmental sustainability, but also to the economic viability of the farms and the social, cultural dimension of farming. We know that producing food means much more than a simple economic activity. There's a lot that is related to local traditions, culture, and rural communities, identity. So really the farmers are deeply, deeply connected to who we are, to our cultural identity. Our mission, as I said, is to bring their voice onto in the international arena. We operate under a strategic framework that sets the guidelines for us until 2028. I'm not entering into details. I will be happy to share those slides after the webinar. But please just remember that the first pillar is about having as many farmers' organizations as possible. A global farmers' voice is as strong as its members' representativeness. So it's very important to grow. And this is what WFO has been doing. In 9 years, we reached the number that I referred to, so more than 70 organizations, and we are still growing. Then for sure, Jody has already mentioned that one of the focuses that we have at WFO is on partnerships. We know that for sure farming is fundamental, is the primary sector, but we are in this food production and we are on this planet together. And it's only by creating a network, a solid network of trusted partners across the value chain with the civil society, with the academia, with the governments, in a multilateral approach, that we can build a better world for all, a more sustainable world for all. Then the third pillar is about our daily job. We are an organization that needs policy papers, policy statements, policies in general, in order to advocate for them. So, for instance, we work on many different strategic areas. Last year, during our General Assembly, we approved, for instance, a position, a global farmers' position on antimicrobial resistance, one of the most tricky issues in the world. So this is the kind of work that we do. You can imagine them bringing together such a diverse set of farmers, the very small scale and the big agribusinesses, is very complicated, but it's also amazing to see that farmers, when confronted to an issue, always find a way to focus on what unites them and not on what divides them. And finally, and that is also a very important piece when it comes to youth, we work on capacity building. It's about training for sure, but it's also about creating the opportunities for all the farmers across the globe to personally bring their voice to the table. Here you can see in a very, let's say, synthetic way, how we function. I always say that there's a king within WFO, and the king is the General Assembly. So the most important body of our associations are all of our members when they gathered, and they take all the important decisions about who represents them, about what messages we need to bring to the table, about what is the mandate for the Secretariat also to operate with. Then there's the board of directors that is guaranteeing a geographical balance, so one member per each region, and the president that is always elected by the General Assembly. And at the moment, our president is Dr. Theo de Jager, who's a farmer in Limpopo, South Africa. Here you can see the wonderful team that is working at WFO Secretariat. As you can see, this is a very small team, but very passionate, professional, and focused on trying to serve the farmers across the globe. Again, on partnerships, let me go back to this, because I think that that's the key also to solve the many issues that we are still facing, including COVID. As you can see, WFO looks at partnerships beyond the traditional agricultural sector to include civil society quite a lot. It's very important, just to make an example, to have a stronger and stronger relationship with the consumers, that are those that are making the choices on the shelves and that can influence the market and pull the chain of the market until the farmers back on their farm. And now let's try to go to the action now. So far it was an introduction about who we are, but now let's see what WFO does every day. So our approach is bottom-up. We call it the farmers-driven approach. It is on the farmers' shoulders to express their voice. It is their own responsibility to make sure that their voice can be heard. And our General Assembly gave the mandate to work on the areas that you can see here on the screen: food security, climate change, value chain and trade, livestock and antimicrobial resistance, cooperatives, women, and youth empowerment. Why is it so important to clearly refer to these areas? Because again, this is what the farmers wanted the organization to deal with. But before jumping on the two focuses of climate change and youth empowerment, we cannot avoid to talk about COVID-19, the profound impact that it's having first and foremost on our lives, on the health of people, but also on the organization. Since February, so I told you we are sitting in Italy, you probably know that Italy is also one of the most affected countries. So even our capacity of working in the office has been erased by COVID. We are all working remotely, for instance. I would say probably working more than before, but in any case, working remotely. But let's be clear, the real issue is that COVID-19 has profoundly modified the world around us. And we know that probably there's not going to be a back to normal. We can and we must imagine a new normal, a different way of shaping our daily lives, our social relationships, but also the way we farm and the way we bring our produce to the markets and the way we organize our value chains. So we say that if there's one thing that COVID-19 has taught us is that we can live without anything. We can live without theaters, we can live without restaurants, we can live without, I don't know, libraries, but we need food. And farmers are key players in food production. We know that now more than ever, it's time to honor the farming community and to make sure that they can continue producing and bringing food to the markets. So that's why the first action that WFO has undertaken since February this year is to launch a campaign on social media, and I invite you then to click and to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever you might choose. But the idea is farmers never give up. Farmers have not stopped. They are continuing producing for us all, for all the people across the globe. And it's important to thank them. For sure, we need to thank doctors and nurses who are vital during this outbreak, but farmers are as vital as the others in ensuring that we can stay safe, that we can respect, for instance, lockdowns, and we can keep on being healthy. So that was the first piece of our, let's say, revised strategy at COVID times. But we clearly realized that there's one additional need, and this is in the spirit of serving our members and the wider farmers community. Countries are at different level in this outbreak, and the experience of farmers and farmers organizations across the globe are different. And there's so much that is going on that we decided to gather all the information in an agri-information hub on COVID-19, where we provide with data and information that are not the statistical data coming from the governments, but that are the real voice of the farmers directly from the different countries. And based on the very different and diverse experiences that we have collected so far, we've just published a first and for sure temporary impact assessment of COVID-19 on the agricultural sector. We consider it a living document, and I invite you to download it from our website and to check, to verify how resilient farmers have proved to be, how strong the link with their communities is, and the incredible potential of building back better that COVID is bringing to us. Just as an example, in many countries, farmers are donating the production that is unfortunately remaining unsold for the disruptions in the value chains to communities that are in need, to the most vulnerable. In other countries, we are assisting at innovation and digital transformation with the farmers and their organizations, very quickly launching online selling tools and applications and trying to bridge the gap of logistics and retailers. So again, COVID is a huge and a terrible, dramatic event in the world, but we must focus on thinking already of what kind of world, what kind of food production we want to see. And with this, if there are no questions, so I'll pause just for 1 second in case Jody would like to raise already some questions.
No, we're good, Arianna. Continue.
Okay, thanks, Jody. So moving on, I mentioned at the beginning that I would like to share with you 2 specific focuses. You remember the flower with the farmers at the heart and the different areas that we are dealing with. So climate change is one of those. With a quote from our president, farmers are at the front line of climate change. We are experiencing climate change in terms of droughts or floods, in terms of change in the planting season, exceptional weather events, and we must take into account that climate change is particularly hitting in the most vulnerable areas, in areas where people, and unfortunately farmers too, are food insecure. So it's very important that farmers can participate in the process that is defining the rules around climate change. But you know, it's not so easy. And farmers were particularly frustrated because nothing in the climate negotiations was referring to farmers. And even in Paris, with the Paris Agreement, there is a reference to food production, but the role of farmers as actors of both mitigation and adaptation was not there. So farmers decided to change the approach and to take a farmers-driven approach to climate negotiations. And back in 2018, we launched an initiative that we call the Climakers. So trying to build a better climate, trying to be actors of this process. The Climakers started as a WFO initiative, but it immediately appeared clear that, as I was saying at the beginning of our exchange, we cannot solve any issue on our own, and we need to partner. We need to partner up in the value chain. We need to partner with research world. We need to be together with civil society in trying to drive the change that we want to see towards a more sustainable agriculture and a more sustainable world. That's why the Climakers, so I'm sorry, there's a video here, but apparently we have some technical issues. So you can see on the bottom of the screen the link to the Climakers initiatives, and I invite you to visit the website and to check the video directly. But let me tell you, the Climakers is first and foremost an alliance of actors that is driven by farmers, and around the farmers there's a whole network of bodies and entities that believe that we can provide solutions that are pragmatic, science-based, and sustainable in its 3 dimensions, again, to the climate challenge. As you can see, Climate Alliance includes farmers' organizations from across the globe, the Caribbean, Europe, but also the Pan-African organization and the 3 sub-regional farmers' organizations in Africa. But beyond that, also the private sector, you can see here the seed sector, the agrochemical sector, the fertilizer sector, they immediately decided to join this alliance, realizing the power of a farmers-driven message. And then you can see here that research, so the CJAR, which is the UN body for research and for the research program, is with us, particularly CCAP, who is the climate change body, UN CJR body for climate. What are we doing? The idea is to reverse the paradigm. Usually farmers are the targets. Targets are someone else's decisions, of the governments for sure, or UN decisions. So here we start with the farmers. We start with their incredible, powerful experiences, because we know that out there are already a lot of great initiatives, and we are collecting those experiences and we are including them in publications of success stories. And in parallel, we are working on elaborating guidelines for the governments in order to improve what we call the NDCs, so the national determined contributions, which is to say the commitments around climate that every country has to take. And what we want is that those commitments can be a win-win solutions. For sure, the government must demonstrate that they are putting in place commitments that make us advance towards the objectives. But on the other hand, what we want is that those commitments are visible and can ensure that farmers can keep on farming and ensure the livelihoods, not only today, but in the future. So I'm sorry. So that's what we expect from the climate makers. As I mentioned, we have launched the initiative in 2018, and already in 2019, the HLPF, the high-level political forum for the SDGs, or for the Agenda 2030 in New York, recognized the climate maker as a best practice in implementing SDG 13, which is the objective related to climate change on the global scene. So we are still working, and as you can imagine, COVID has also disrupted our activities that we were supposed to deploy through physical gatherings, but we are still working hard to collect those experiences. And I really would love to hear also from you and to welcome any idea or any best practices that you maybe are implementing on your own farm in your country. With that, I will move to the last and let's say last, I told you last but not least, to youth is one of the most pressing priorities for WFO. And I would like to show you how WFO is committing to the youngsters, how WFO is trying to promote young farmers' participation. And I think that the first point that I want to raise with you is that young farmers' organizations can join WFO and can participate in the life of the associations. So why is it important? You know, if you have a group of young farmers associations talking among young farmers, you for sure can have beautiful ideas. But what you need is to bring them into the big playing field and influence the mainstream. So that's why WFO wants young farmers associations to be sitting in the General Assembly next to any other member, so bringing their innovative voice to the table. The second commitment of WFO is a specific youth committee that, that let's say can work in a cross-cutting way on all the policy areas of WFO to bring specific views and positions from the young farmers' perspective. Let me just tell you that this is the way WFO really drives the political production, say internal political policy papers production. We always start with the working groups or with the committees that are composed in a bottom-up approach by 2 members per each constituency and a facilitator. Also for the youth committee, we have the same configuration, and the facilitator, Dennis Kabito, is a young farmer from Uganda that is, let's say, coordinating the activity of the youth committee of WFO. I would like to share with you, I would say, a recent commitment. So that's actually, I would say, still work in progress. But in Rome, at the Rome UN agency, so FAO, IFA, the World Food Programme, there is a work in progress to have a youth council. I think it's important that you are aware of that. And WFO is taking part in this youth council with 2 young farmers, one from Europe and one from Africa, representing the needs of the young farmers also within that body. And finally, I kept the best for the end. We are very proud of our gymnasium program, and that was also the starting point of our conversation with Nuffield, and this is actually from where we started to agree on a potential partnership, and I'm very happy about it. The gymnasium is a high-level capacity building program that focuses on ensuring that future farmers leaders have the knowledge and soft skills that they need to master the international arena. And the program is implemented with the support of Bayer. Within the gymnasium, what we do is to take a group of 20 young farmers from across the globe, and they gather twice a year to discuss about the most pressing issues and the international processes that are affecting agriculture. And what they really do is to grow together and to learn from each other and to become more and more aware of this invisible line that connects the UN debate and the life on the farm. I think that's probably the most important outcome that we had from the first session of the first edition, of the gymnasium that ended earlier this year in February. This awareness that the word of for instance, of the United Nations that could appear so far away from your farm, from your dairy farm, for instance, well, it's not that far. And your commitment as young farmer leader can really make the difference on the global scene. But when we work on the youth empowerment through the gymnasium, we do not only provide this fantastic group of young farmers with information or with coaching on soft skills. That's for sure very important. But what we've been doing, and here you can see on the arrow the elements that some bullets that represents the events actually, that farmers, the young farmers could participate into. And when I say participate, I don't mean sitting on a chair and listening, but we have been exposing young farmers to the opportunity of taking the floor. For instance, at the Committee on Food Security, in the plenary session of the committee, or at the GFFA, the Global Forum for Food and Agriculture in Germany, or again in New York at the UN HLPF, and in Madrid last December during COP25. So And finally, FAFO, which is an acronym that stands for Farmers Forum at IFAD. The idea is that not only you can be trained about the topics, but you really live these processes, and you can already bring your contributions. The results were amazing. Our board, our president always says that if he could have had this opportunity 20 years ago, the whole debate about agriculture worldwide might have been different. So that's why it's also so important what you are doing, the opportunity of knowing what's going on in other parts of the world, and the knowledge sharing that also Nuffield International is offering to you all. And I will stop here, and I am more than happy to take any questions. Over to you, Jody.
Thank you, Arianna. We have a couple of questions come through. One is about the Clymakers. You have a number of partners in Clymakers with differing strategic goals. How does the WFO successfully manage these partnerships?
Yeah, pretty good one question. I'm sorry it's anonymous, but I'm happy to reply. Yes, it's true. We are very different from one another, and even within the farmers' constituency, we are different. But the differences that we have can be managed if we focus on what is the issue, what is at stake here. And the fact is that climate change is a question of life or death for the farmers and for the farming activity in the future. That's why having this clear awareness facilitates the exchange, first of all. And then the message is clear. This is a farmers-driven initiative. So the first step is to ensure that we take into account the farmers' voice in bringing solutions to the table. Then I am not, I'm not blind, and I know that the solutions that can work, I know, in the Maghreb region, Northern Africa, will be profoundly different from those who will be implemented in New Zealand, and Russia will be different from Brazil. But, you know, it's not about having a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about providing a very diverse set of solutions that you can imagine like a toolbox. And the toolbox must be filled with tools, as many tools as possible, so that then every farmer, based on its or her own reality, can choose the most appropriate for the situation he or she is experiencing. I hope this answers, but I'm happy to go deeper if necessary.
Thank you, Arianna. We have another question about the gymnasium. Are the gymnasium farmers mostly from developing nations? What's the spread?
Oh yeah, good one. So the gymnasium, I told you, it's a group of 20 young farmers, and we pay special attention to the geographical balance. So what you have is an equal representation of both developing and developed countries. And that is what is really amazing about that. There's such a great flow of information in north, south, south, north, south, south. So it's really much more than where you're from. It's creating a real group that goes beyond where you're from.
Thanks, Arianna. We have one of our 2020 scholars from the UK, Nicola, who has asked who funded the startup of the WFO and how is it financially supported now?
Sorry, Jody, it was, I couldn't hear. Yeah. I had...
Who funded the WFO? Mm-hmm. Who funded the WFO and how is it financially supported now?
Yeah. So the WFO is a farmers organization, and it's a member-based organization. And we are very proud of our of saying that we are an independent farmers organization where farmers pay a fee every year to be a member and to have their voice. So we the source of funding is first and foremost the membership fees that our members pay. And then for sure, we can work on specific projects with public and private partners. I referred, for instance, to the fact that the gymnasium was implemented in collaboration with Bayer, but we work with the multilateral organizations, with work with universities, we work with other farmers organizations across the globe. But first and foremost, we are a member-based, and our members commit to pay a fee in order to ensure that we can keep our voice independent.
Sure. What do you think the top 3 immediate priorities will be for the WFO post-COVID? So say in the next 2 years.
I'm very, very happy about this question because there is a huge piece of activity that was not mentioned in my presentation, and that is where we really invest in a lot of energy. And it is the preparation of the Food System Summit. You are probably aware that the Secretary General of the United Nations has convened for next year a huge summit that is actually mandated to bring a holistic solutions to a wide set of challenges that we are facing, knowing that the issues of the systems are clear. So climate is one of those. The permanent paradox between hunger and obesity is another one. The loss of biodiversity, and the livelihoods of farmers is another topic. So we're working hard. And let me just slightly change the question, if I can say that this is not for a post-COVID, it's already there. We are already working for the post-COVID world. And so food systems and the Food System Summit is for sure the top priority. Then for sure climate, even as a separate stream, stays as a fundamental priority for WFO and the world. Because, you know, COVID, everybody says this COVID is here to stay, but we know that, yeah, probably it's something that in the midterm will be solved. So maybe in 3-5 years. But if we do not cope with climate change, and if we do not revert the situation to a more positive approach, it's going to be a disaster for all the farmers. I mean, the floods happened in Rwanda last week are an example. The locusts in Eastern Africa, another one. So this climate change doesn't wait for COVID to be over. And then I think that the third challenge that I would refer to, let me jump from one thematic area to something that is more about the organization itself. The real challenge for us, and I would say for the world, is to have a proper representation of the farmer's voice in all the processes. This is what we are trying to do as WFO, and this is where we are investing more and more. So the voice of the farmers must be heard in a much stronger way, and not from those who pretend to represent the farmers, but from the farmers themselves.
Thank you, Arianna. We do have one of our attendees who has posted as anonymous, but would love to come to the summit. So is it possible to get invites to the summit? That could be tongue in cheek, I'm not sure.
So the Food System Summit is a UN summit. So WFO doesn't hold the key to any invitations, but the approach and the preparation that is now led by the special envoy, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, is very inclusive and profoundly rooted in the territories. So what I am expecting and what WFO is asking for is a deep process of listening to the experiences in each and every country at the very grassroots level, so to ensure that the solutions are not kind of decided on the very top in the ivory tower and then launched down to the rest of the world. So I am expecting to see a wide participation, but as far as the event itself, so in case it can take place physically, I have no clue about who's going to attend. For sure, the governments, because we have to remember that is a UN initiative, and therefore first in line are the governments.
Thank you. Now we have a question here from Frank in the Netherlands. Sorry, he's asked about: is there any attention in the topic of the availability of sweet water worldwide? I'm just not sure what you mean by that, Frank. But you should be able to talk. Frank, I think I've just unmuted you. Can you explain your question to Arianna? No, he's still on mute. Frank, you might be on mute yourself. No, we can't hear him.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can now, Frank. Thank you.
Hi, Frank.
Okay. Yes, my question deals with the first step that we made in the Nuffield program is that we go to Australia. And what's happened there is that I've seen that there is a lot of questions about sweet water. And now we have a real dry period in Holland, and sweet water availability will be also an issue in Holland and in Europe. So my question is the availability of sweet water for the agriculture a real issue worldwide and in your organization?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, thank you, Frank. Yes, you're perfectly right. And your experience, I mean, our members in the Netherlands are sharing the same concern. Our European members, but not only the European members. And actually, I want to share with you another piece of information about what WFO is doing. For sure, the issue of water management, as well as soil management, soil health, is part of our activities and priorities, both specifically and in the wider framework of climate change. But WFO is also directly involved in a very important UN process on disaster risk management. And most of the time, what we are assisting at is that the issue of water management is strictly related to extreme weather events and to disasters, natural disasters. And that's why it's so important that we can build, on the one hand, an agricultural, agronomic solution. We can improve the framework in terms of mitigation and adaptation on climate change, but we also need to build resilience in order to cope with extreme weather events or natural events. I want to share with you the experience of our Caribbean members that you probably are aware of in the Netherlands. And it is actually the ties that goes up into the rivers, into the internal rivers, and destroy with too high level of salinity the quality of the soil. So yes, I can confirm. And if you need any more information, I invite you to connect later on, and I will be happy to connect you with our experts.
Thank you, Arianna. I have muted Frank again now, but really appreciate him jumping on and explaining his question. I did have one. Early on in your presentation, you said it was important to focus on what unites farmers rather than what divides us. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I think it'd be nice to end with some positivity. Not that you've been negative, but you know, we are all struggling with a lot of issues at the moment. So it'd be nice to know what unites us.
Yes, sure. Thanks for the question. And that's sometimes it can seem a little philosophical, but it's not. It's very, very pragmatic and very practical. You can tackle any issue with a kind of dualistic approach, and you can always have white versus black, a good versus bad. If you want, you can do it like this. And I truly and honestly respect the different positions. But the aim of the World Farmers Organizations is to ensure that we can have this unite voice of the farmers across the globe. So what is the difference? So I can face the climate change challenge by pointing fingers and who's to blame and who should do something or should not. Or I can go the other way around, and that's the idea of the farmers-driven approach, and say, we farmers from all over the globe, we are experiencing climate change. We have a survey in the Climatemakers, and 97% of the respondents to the survey told us, yes, climate change is here. I see it on my farm. So that's where I focus to start deploying our action. And then from there, we move on into focusing on the solutions. And but to that, I want to share with you another example. For instance, among my members, when we talk about innovation, we have members that are in favor of a certain kind of technology, solutions, and others that are against. But all of them feel that innovation as a process is key, and that we need to ensure that the most diverse set of solutions is made available in terms of access to innovations to farmers, in order to ensure that even the very small scale farmers can implement innovation processes. So I hope this explains the way we deal with the differences. So the differences are our richness, but then we focus on unity and what unites us to develop statements that can be then brought to the UN General Assembly, for instance, with a mandate that is global. And maybe it is also important to notice that every policy position of WFO is always approved by the General Assembly. So you need to have a message that is valid for all the members, otherwise you wouldn't get the approval.
Thank you, Arianna. Another question just coming through. What's your current influence on the new farm to fork strategy of the EU?
I would say no direct influence. WFO is a global organization. Our members are national farmers organizations, and for sure they do work also in collaboration with the regional farmers organizations, in this case the Europeans. They work on the strategy, on the farm to fork strategy. What we do is to work on the wider framework, on the wider picture. For sure, the farm to fork strategy is deeply interconnected with the food systems debate. So we work on the food systems debate, while then the regional farmers organizations cope with the farm to fork strategy. We never enter into any national or regional debate, respecting the difference of role that we have.
Thank you. So if there's no more questions, I might...
I see here, maybe I see another question in the question and answer chat.
Sorry, Correct.
Yeah.
From Ranga. From your experience, is there any attention being given to Indigenous knowledge farming systems in Africa? Is the youth showing any inclination to this? Thank you.
Yeah. So let me tell you, Indigenous knowledge is a vital piece of the knowledge sharing and also the innovation process. And in Africa, but also Latin America and in Asia. So it's not only about Africa. And not only attention is paid to the indigenous knowledge by the agencies and by WFO itself, in the framework, for instance, of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, so in the framework of the so-called major groups in the HLPF, the High Level Political Forum in New York. There is an indigenous people major group. I'm sorry, it is pretty much complicated, but just for you to know, when the UN wants to get the advice of the civil society and the stakeholders, let's say, they try to create categories. And for instance, in the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030, there's one category for the farmers that is led by WFO in collaboration with another farmers organization. There is an indigenous people group, a major group, that brings that dimension of the indigenous knowledge into the discussion. And for sure, we work together between the farmers' constituency and the indigenous people to ensure that we value the links between each other. The same is for IFAD, for instance, in Rome, where you have a specific body, specific council for indigenous people and therefore indigenous knowledge.
Thank you. Now, we will be able to stay on if there are any more questions coming in, but given that the hour has just passed, I would like to say thank you, Arianna, because we will have some people that will need to leave. So obviously, thank you for presenting. I really appreciate that. And thank you for our attendees for listening in to Arianna's presentation. So don't forget, as I said, the webinar will be available on the YouTube channel for viewing afterwards, and you will be sent a post-webinar survey. So please fill that in. It will be useful to both Nuffield International and to WFO in our relationship moving forward. So just a little bit about next month's webinar. Next month, at the end of the month, we will be joined by 3 Nuffield Scholars from Ireland. Karen Brosnan from 2013, who is the chair of Nuffield in Ireland at the moment. Also, Roberta McDonald, 2016 scholar, and Karina Pierce, 2018 scholar, and they'll be discussing diversity in agriculture. So please look out for that invitation in your inbox. But that's all we have for tonight. I think Arianna is still with us. Yes, there you are. Thank you. Just once more, thank you very much for coming on and speaking to us and answering some questions as well. We really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, goodbye. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Jody. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.